Jaya Radha Nila Madhava Nila Madhava Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Brajajanarandana Jasodanandana Brajajanarandana Yamunatira Vanachadi Tira Vanachadi Yamunatira Vanachadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari 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 Gopi Jana Balabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Brajajanarandana Jasodanandana Brajajanarandana Jamanatira Vanam Jadi Jamanatira Vanam Jadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Om Vishwapad Paramahamsa Parivajagacharya Asta Terasatasi Simad His Divine Grace C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Gaur Pemanandi. This morning we'll be covering 2 verses, and the second verse, text 29, is probably going to take a few days because it's an important verse. It's quoted many places because of its importance. We're coming towards the end of this section, the Avadhuta Brahman section, 3 chapters. Here's text 28, translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, expanding His own potency, Maya Shakti, created innumerable species of life to house the conditioned souls. Yet, by creating the forms of trees, reptiles, animals, birds, snakes, and so on, the Lord was not satisfied within His heart. Then He created human life, which offers the conditioned soul sufficient intelligence to perceive the absolute truth and became pleased. Interesting. Now, a little comment for the online devotees. Be prepared to send questions because our this morning is a little bit reduced for different reasons, and so if you're going to be some discussion, it's probably going to come from you folks, fine folks. So here's Bhakti Siddhanta's translation of the verse. The Supreme Lord first created, with the help of His energy Maya Shakti, trees, insects, animals, birds, reptiles, and so on. Yet He was not satisfied. Finally, the Lord created the human body, which offers the conditioned soul sufficient intelligence to realize Him, and thus He became pleased. The BBT purport reads, God has specifically created the human form of life to facilitate the liberation of the conditioned soul. Therefore, one who abuses human life prepares his path to hell. As stated in the Vedas, Purushatve Chashvishvaram Atma, or in the human form of life, there is good possibility of understanding the eternal soul. The Vedas also state, there's a long Sanskrit sloka, the purport of this Shruti mantra is that lower forms of life, such as the cow and horse, are not actually suitable to fulfill the purpose of creation. But human life awards the opportunity to understand one's eternal relationship with God. Thus, one must control the material senses and fulfill the real purpose of human life. If one takes to Krishna consciousness, the Supreme Personality of Godhead feels happiness and gradually reveals himself to the devotee. Paragraph. The Lord's material creation consists of the living entities and dead matter, which the less intelligent try to enjoy. The Lord, however, is not satisfied by those species that blindly strive for sense gratification without understanding spiritual nature. We are suffering due to our forgetfulness of Krishna and the blissful situation of his abode. If we accept the Lord as protector and shelter and execute his order, we can easily revive our eternal, blissful nature as parts and parcels of the personality of Godhead. It is for this purpose that the Lord has created human life. And Bhaktisiddhanta's purport. The Supreme Lord, with the help of his energy, creates the enjoyers and objects of enjoyment, imbuing them with their respective propensities. However, the enjoyers, the minute conditioned spirit souls, cannot be satisfied by enjoying limited and temporary inert objects until the conditioned soul, who is a part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, realizes that the attempt to enjoy material form, taste, smell, sound, and touch without self-realization is most abominable. He will continue to suffer material miseries. However, when he realizes his spiritual identity as the eternal servant of the Lord, he crosses over the influence of Maya and accepts himself as being maintained and protected by the Lord. Such a pure devotee, being freed from false pride, never thinks of himself as the maintainer or enjoyer. The maintainer idea is connected from previous ideas of the materialist who is thinking they have this important responsibility to maintain their family members and that they're the maintainers, not that they're serving God and God is maintaining his family members. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, his commentary is summarized by Bhaktisiddhanta this way. The human form of body, which can award one liberation, was created by the Supreme Controller. Therefore, one should not misuse this body and go to hell. It is described in this verse, after creating various types of bodies, the Supreme Controller was not satisfied, and so he finally created the human body, considering it suitable for awarding the conditioned soul the opportunity to regain his association. It is stated in the Vedas that after creating the human form of body, the Supreme Lord achieved immense happiness. And quote from Aitreya Upanishad. The Sanskrit is there, and then the translation of the Sanskrit. After creating various types of bodies, the Lord called for a cow and asked, "Do you know the Supreme Lord?" She replied, "No, I cannot understand who is the Supreme Lord." Then the Lord called a horse and asked the same question. The horse gave a similar reply. Then the Lord called for human beings and asked them the same question. They replied, "We know you by your mercy." So Bhagavatam is commentary. on the Vedas and ripened fruit of all the Vedas and commentary on so many things. Gayatri Mantra, Vedanta Sutra. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes, we read the gloss, here's what he writes. Since the Lord created the human body for attaining liberation, one should not use it to go to hell. The Lord created many bodies, Purani. Then he created the human body in which intelligence gives one direct vision of the Supreme Lord. Shruti says, Puru Shatve Cha Vishtaram Atma. The Lord manifests as the human being. Then quoting Aitareya Upanishad, much shorter version. He brought the Devatas a cow, but they were not satisfied. He brought them a horse, but they were not satisfied. He brought them the human being, and they accepted the human. Much shorter version. Bhaktisiddhanta quoted the whole Sanskrit. Now here's a little essay that cites these two verses, 28 and the next one, 29. The title of the essay is Offering of Love and Separation. Among the 24 gurus, the Avadhuta Brahman Dattatreya described to Maharaj Yadu, one was his own material body. The teaching that he received from his body included the two following verses. Text 28. With the help of his Maya potency, the Supreme Lord created this visible world with its trees, serpents, animals, birds, and other creatures, but his heart remained dissatisfied. Then he created man, who alone possesses the intelligence to see Brahman, and he was delighted. And then the next verse, which we haven't read yet, but we will, is text 29. So listen carefully. We're going to hear this several times because it's tomorrow, because it's referred to again and again. So listen to the words because it's important. After many, many births, one is finally born in a most rare and valuable human body. Although it may be temporary, it provides an opportunity to attain the supreme goal. Therefore, the wise individual should immediately take up the effort to find that which provides the supreme good in all times and circumstances, and not give it up right to the moment of death. The second verse is often quoted to stress the rarity of human life and the necessity of engaging in the worship of the Lord without delay. In commenting on this verse, it is written, the conditioned soul, quote, the conditioned soul is subject to repeated births, in which he may sometimes become a god, sometimes a human, or even an animal, a tree, or some other immovable entity. These various external sheaths give the being differing identities according to which they engage in sense gratification and other activities appropriate to that species. The specificity of the human form of life, however, is that it allows one to learn about and experience the truth. It is thus an extremely important stop on the soul's voyage from species to species, for elsewhere, such experience and understanding of the truth about reality are beyond reach. And continuing commentary, at the same time, the human body is not everlasting. The embodied soul that resides within that body has an extraordinary opportunity to achieve something of ultimate value. While in this body, he can consider what is the supreme good for himself. Before death strikes him down, it is imperative that he learn what that supreme good is. He must distance himself from all the apparent benefits related to the impermanent body and seek the joy that comes from his eternal duty of service to the Supreme Truth. This is most important for one who wishes to achieve that which is of eternal benefit to him. Those who have use of their intelligence should think over this matter. One more paragraph. The human being's use of time should be directed to the most important things, namely the service to the Supreme Lord. We can establish our ultimate good by following those who are committed to serving the Lord and do not waste their time in the trivial pursuit of flickering sense pleasures. The human being's only duty is understanding what is his ultimate good. Semicolon. When assessing which of our duties are more or less important, we should place this priority at the top of the list. Bhakti, the true end of repeated births and deaths, arises through association with devotees. Without bhakti, the living being is so afflicted by the three kinds of material suffering that he either becomes a Mayavadi out of the desire for personal salvation or a fruitive worker out of a desire for sense gratification. Now that's a really good verse, and it leads into this one. Labdava, having obtained. Sudurlabham, which is difficult to attain. It's very similar to the verse from the Bhagavatam. Although the human form of life is difficult to achieve, although it is temporary, it's difficult to achieve, and the goal of life can be attained by it. So, same message here. Bahu sambhavante, manusham artadam, anityam apiha dhiraha. Okay. After many, many births and deaths, one achieves the rare human form of life, which, although temporary, affords one the opportunity to attain the highest perfection. That's the artadam. Artadam, highest perfection, greatest value. Thus, a sober human being should quickly endeavor for the ultimate perfection of life as long as his body, which is always subject to death, has not fallen down and died. After all, sense gratification is available even in the most abominable species of life. Krishna consciousness is possible only for a human being. So these two verses are connected, the message, the special feature of human life. Here's Bhaktisiddhanta's translation of verse. After many lifetimes in lower species, one achieves the rare human form of life. Paragraph. Although temporary, the human body gives one the opportunity to attain the perfection of life. It's healthy. After all, gratification is available in all the other species of life, whereas Krishna consciousness can only be cultivated by a human being. Here's the BBT purport, and then we'll read one more, and then we'll end. Material life essentially means repeated birth and death. Even the lowest forms of life, such as reptiles, insects, pigs, and dogs, have ample opportunity for sense gratification. Even ordinary houseflies have a busy sex life and thus multiply rapidly. Human life, however, enables one to understand the absolute truth and is therefore full of grave responsibility. Since the valuable human life is not eternal, we should do the needful to achieve the highest perfection, Krishna consciousness. Before death appears, we should seriously cultivate our real self-interest. Paragraph. One can experience Krishna consciousness in the association of devotees of the Lord. Without their association, one is in danger of being attracted to an impersonal conception of life which causes one to fall away from devotional service of the absolute truth, or being discouraged by one's failure to understand the absolute truth, one may return to the false platform of sense gratification. In conclusion, human life is meant for cultivating Krishna consciousness under the guidance of the experienced, self realized devotees of the Lord. And the last is a paraphrase of Bhaktisiddhanta's paraphrasing of Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur's commentary. It's strong. The conditioned souls are subjected to the cycle of repeated birth and death. Paragraph. Sometimes one becomes a demigod, sometimes a human being, sometimes an animal, sometimes a tree, or even a stone. In this way, the eternal soul identifies himself in various ways according to the body that he receives. According to his particular type of body, a living entity is destined to enjoy a particular set of sense objects. This is also true for a human being, but the human form of life affords one the opportunity to cultivate knowledge of the absolute truth. Therefore, the human form of life is extremely desirable. Still, one cannot remain permanently in the human body. Paragraph. Only the human form affords one the opportunity of attaining life's ultimate goal. And the final paragraph. Therefore, while situated in a human body, one should carefully consider how to attain life's perfection and not waste his valuable time in gratifying his senses to no avail. Even activities meant for the temporary welfare of human society should be avoided. One should only cultivate the devotional service of the Lord because only this will afford him eternal benefit. One's supreme benefit is obtained when one follows in the footsteps of those who, duties to family, society, and one's occupation seem prominent as long as one does not strive for his ultimate benefit by surrendering to the Lord. By the association of devotees, one awakens his eternal propensity for devotional service. Without taking shelter of the association of devotees, one must continue to suffer the threefold material miseries. Last sentence. Even when such non-devotees strive for liberation from material miseries, they generally become impersonalists. Now that was Bhaktisiddhanta. It wasn't his gloss, it was Bhaktisiddhanta's purport. So, that's, summary of this really strong medicine. I'm going to show you on the screen up here, two slides. One is interesting depiction of various species of life, birds and aquatics and insects and butterflies and so forth. And this is meant to illustrate this text. The Supreme Personality of Godhead expanding his own potency, Maya Shakti, created innumerable species of life to house the conditioned souls. Yet, it's interesting, why yet? By creating the form of trees, reptiles, animals, birds, snakes, and so on, the Lord was not satisfied within his heart. Then he created human life, which offers the conditioned souls sufficient intelligence to perceive the absolute truth and become pleased. So that was 28. Here's 29. Since the valuable human life is not eternal, we should do the needful to achieve the highest perfection, Krishna consciousness, before death appears. We should seriously cultivate our real self-interest. One can experience Krishna consciousness in the association of devotees of the Lord. So there's a nice Bhagavatam class picture. Shukadeva Goswami speaking. And so many sages hearing this proper use of human form of life. Now there's some strong language that Bhakti Siddhanta speaks about in his purport. Devotees should stay away from humanitarian and philanthropic work. So, like one of those posters out in the lobby is our food for life. So what's that? Should we open schools? Should we open hospitals? Should we do those things? As a religious organization or spiritual organization, should we do those things? And yes, we should do those things with Krishna at the center. So the discouragement is where Krishna is not at the center. And there's this, going back to the hermeneutics topic, there's this picture where you could take a statement out of context and like that's your pramana to say don't have schools and don't feed people and don't do those things. And so how to understand a statement, the context and the big picture and everything needs to be depicted. So we're not intimidated or staying away from those things. We don't do them in isolation. In isolation means without the explicit beginning, middle, and end purpose of awakening the soul's knowledge of the absolute truth. It can be expressed in different ways and carried out in different ways. The practical application of these teachings can look differently according to different places and times and circumstances. I really, really like Prabhupada's answer in the Hare Krishna video or film that Yadavar produced and traveled around promoting it. Television interviewer, they're in the studio. Swamiji, you came to America. You must have had a mission. What's the message? And Prabhupada's answer was really short. Know yourself. And the interviewer was it seemed a little taken back, and so he just repeated, know yourself. Prabhupada repeated, know yourself. Shri Shri Radha Nila Madhava, he died. So when that mission is at the center, then these other activities are just part of keeping that at the center. Although, for example, although we're not these bodies, there is the institution of marriage in spiritual society, and it, etc. There are sacrifices. People do make sacrifices. They undergo austerities and difficulties. Devotees do those things too. And in other words, things that look material have their spiritual origin, and there is a place for them. But minus, so the risk is you do those things, and the minus Krishna becomes prominent because absorption in matter. That's the risk of doing things, and you can't not do things. So how do you navigate? There is necessity for education. There's necessity for health, and so on. I'm reminded now, just speaking this, another Prabhupada story, anecdote. In the UK, in London, there was a young man who had become a brahmachari in the ashram. And Prabhupada was visited by his mother and the priest. And the mother said flattering things to Prabhupada, "You're doing wonderful work, etc., etc. And my son will do whatever you say, so please tell him to become a doctor." And Prabhupada wasn't going to tell him to become a doctor. And, she wanted him to become a doctor, but he wouldn't do what she said. So he wanted Prabhupada to tell him to become a doctor. And essentially he said, there's so many doctors. We take, don't you take help from doctors, Swamiji? Yes, so many doctors. We don't have to become a doctor to take help from a doctor. Well, but doctors can do good for many people, just like you go to doctors. He didn't budge. And then the priest chimed in to say his part, and Prabhupada didn't budge. Now, there's no harm in a nice devotee becoming a doctor. But this young man wanted to be a brahmachari, and who knows, maybe today that same young person is a doctor. By now, a retired doctor. But the focus specific for the preaching mission, Bhaktisiddhanta had this emphasis as well. For the preaching mission, there was need for brahmacharis because the brahmacharis have freedom to preach without having to do the other things and dovetail the other things with Krishna service. So, what the intention was of Srila Prabhupada saying, I want this young man to be a brahmachari, later he could have said later he can become a doctor, but now he needs this training. He didn't say that. That may have been his thought, but that's not the message. The message was the best welfare work to others is you become pure in devotion and distribute that knowledge of pure devotion. That's the best welfare. Better than any doctor. Anyway, I'm just this message of detachment the pendulum can swing way over there, and can be misapplied, misunderstood, and misapplied. For those who are Abhidutta Brahmins, it's fine that you just leave everything. And for those that are inclined to material involvement, the dedication of those things to Krishna service is important. To know yourself. And know yourself, unpack that further. You can't know yourself without knowing God and your connection with God. That's knowing yourself. Okay, so let's see if there's some discussion. Verse 28, 29. Look at this.
The idea that animals can't understand spiritual truths. With the story of Gajendra, it seems like sort of an exception.
Sort of a what?
Sort of an exception to that general rule. Gajendra.
Exception? Animals are an exception.
No,
Or humans are the exception to the general rule.
no, I'm saying it seems like Gajendra, the elephant in the Bhagavatam.
Oh, Gajendra is an exception, yeah.
And then someone might argue that there's some elephants in Guruvayur and certain temples in South India that seems to have some devotion. Could you comment on that?
Well, the Gajendra exception is clear. The other part of your question is not clear. Do you understand the other? Elephants in Guruvayur. In general or a specific elephant? Okay. Yeah, that's exception. I mean, Super Soul is within the heart of every living entity. In the case of Gajendra, it was, Super Soul was reciprocating with his previous life as a great devotee. And there was a mistake, or there was a circumstance that led to his becoming an elephant. So the Supreme Lord gave him what he gave him: remembrance, and the capacity to, although in the body of an elephant, not be entirely confined consciousness-wise to that which is normal for an elephant, not capable of reaching God realization. And the Guruvayur example, well, we don't have such detailed information about previous life, but this, at least for sure, the principle of Super Soul providing remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness can include anyone. Now, what that elephant in Guruvayur remembered of his previous life, who knows? On what basis did that elephant do what that elephant did? I'll tell a little story. It's a current story. When teaching at the VIHE some years ago, during the Kartik month, it was a practice of all. I need some water. Here's a cup. There's some water over there. Look in those. Lift those things. Okay. It was the practice of the devotees every Ekadasi to do the Vrindavan Parikrama, not the whole Brajmandal Parikrama, but just that little path around Vrindavan town. So every Ekadasi, as the devotees would leave after Mangal Arti, leave the front gate, there was a dog who was waiting at the gate. Not every day, but every Ekadasi. And that dog would accompany the devotees around. At least I experienced it twice, because there were 2 Ekadasis during that month. And he would accompany the devotees all around as they were chanting. And there was one particular place on the other side of I forget which place. As you're going to the far southern section, the Vrindavan town, built up Vrindavan town, is no longer, and there's just like fields and some abandoned buildings and things like that. And that was a place where there were some street dogs that would hang out. And the dog knew where that was, so he was over to the right. And as the street dogs heard the whole devotee group going around the Parikrama path, they came out charging, woof, 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 whole pack, dog pack. And so that one dog, with his hair standing on his back and showed his teeth and growled, and he was protecting the devotees, being like an escort, a Kshatriya escort. And the devotees passed, and then he joined the devotees again. But he was like holding off the pack, and they went back because he was there to protect the devotees. I mean, not necessarily that the pack of dogs were going to attack, but they were doing what street dogs do, woof woof and show their teeth and growl. And then he'd follow the devotees back to the main gate of Krishna Balaram temple. And now I don't remember if he paid obeisances, but he stopped at the gate and the devotees went in to join Guru Puja and, deity greeting and Guru Puja. And then he went back to wherever he stayed. So sometimes Super Soul helps living entities in lower life forms engage in service to the devotees, seemingly knowingly, because he knew what was going on. At least he knew when Ekadasi was, and he knew how he knew protecting of the devotees. There's other stories like that, contemporary stories. So it's possible, but exceptional. Anything else? Sure, comment.
Just that this reminded me of how when Vyasadeva wrote all the Vedas, but still he was not satisfied. And then Narada Muni, came and he said, because you have not glorified the Supreme Lord. And so I was thinking, even though Lord was so merciful, then he thought of making humans. But unless we had the Bhagavatam, we wouldn't be able to, do what we are supposed to.
I'm surprised no one, maybe it's going to be online, because our online people are really kind of challenging sometimes. But we have this other picture of human devolution, the topmost living being, and from the topmost living being down and down and down, the devas and humans and other species. But this seems to say something else. The other species, and then human beings. That there's a chronology to it. It wasn't satisfied, and then became satisfied. And the Aitri Upanishad indicating something similar. Online.
We have a couple questions online. First one is from Apurva Anand. Why has Krishna created the lower modes of nature in Kali Yuga? Just consider a hypothetical scenario.
Just considering what?
A hypothetical scenario.
A hypothetical what?
Scenario.
Scenario. Speak clearly, please.
In which only mode of goodness is prevailing, and there is only
more ignorance
Satya.
is prevailing?
Yes.
Okay.
And there is only Satya Yuga. Now different avatars and Nitya Siddhas can come and give the devotional path according to one's choice. For example, in that scenario, if someone would chant Om Namo Narayanai, he would go to Vaikuntha. And if someone would chant Hare Krishna, he would go to Goloka, or something like that. And if someone had not desired to take the devotional path, he could have lived in the material world peacefully without suffering. If Krishna is an unconditional lover, then why is there so much complexity and suffering to those averse to him? The lower modes of material nature force one to think about sense gratification, then commit crimes, and the series of karma go on. Maybe wrongly concluded by me, but I have concluded that these are because Krishna is a possessive lover, but I couldn't figure out the unconditional aspect of Krishna with this reference. How can an unconditional lover and supremely compassionate Lord create lower modes of nature that push a tiny living entity to commit crimes and then give stringent punishments to those crimes?
I could give a really strong answer, but I think I'll give a mild answer. I mean, the stronger answer is you're you're challenging Krishna. And that challenge to Krishna is the cause of your existence in the material world. You take responsibility for that choice. And because of that choice, which you take the responsibility for, comes suffering. And you suffer because of that choice. You know, you would be a better creator than God by your whole scenario, the question, the proposal that you're making. So stuck in that challenging of Krishna paradigm, you suffer. And I think that's an answer to your question, because some persons are challenging, and that's a lower mode. Now, supposing someone is challenging, and they should be happy. That's your proposal. Well, there's no happiness. And the unhappiness or the suffering is also illusory, just like the happiness that you're describing is also illusory. You would like a illusory happiness that has no illusory suffering, but that's not what darkness is. You turn your attention away from light, and there's darkness. You don't want the responsibility. You want God to make light, even when one turns one attention away from the light. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. So why the lower modes are there? It's to facilitate the misuse of free will of living entities. And there's degrees of misuse of free will, just like there's shades of colors, yellow, red, and blue, and mix. So that's a consequence of turning. Why is it there? Because people turn. They want to enjoy separately. And so the facility is to try to enjoy separately, because it does not interfering with free will. Your proposal is there shouldn't be, I mean, you're not saying it, but there shouldn't be free will or the kingdom of God without God. Your proposal is essentially atheistic. Why the lower modes of nature are there is because people want them. Why creation? Because people want independent enjoyment, which is illusion. So illusory happiness and illusory distress are the result of illusion. So what's the cure? It's knowledge that removes ignorance. So I suggest that you read the Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita without a challenging spirit, and you'll understand better.
There was a little bit more to his question. He was saying, I am not saying that giving punishments is wrong, but the creation of lower modes of nature is not understandable to me.
Well, I don't want to cover it again. It's just he's asking the same question in a different way.
He also says, please forgive me if I'm asking anything wrong.
Well, please forgive me for speaking strongly to eradicate your ignorance. Next.
Next question is from Chinmay Desai. It is fascinating how the Supreme Absolute, who is the knower of all the three tenses, comes to despair in the absence of an intelligent species of life.
How he comes prepared?
Comes to despair
Comes to despair.
in the absence of an intelligent species of life, and is jubilated on creating it. How are we to understand that humans are not the latest beings to evolve?
Human are not what?
The latest beings to evolve.
I
More
mean,
popular.
You didn't hear what the verse said. It's not. He's not speaking evolution. He's not the Avadhuta Brahman is not a Darwinian adherent. Your question is as if he is, but he's not. You want to do it again? I'm sorry. I'm responding strongly this morning because it's a misunderstanding of what's being said.
So it is fascinating how the Supreme Absolute, who is the knower of all three tenses, comes to despair in the absence of an intelligent species.
Well, because he is compassionate, and why he shouldn't have that emotion.
He also asks, more popular and more recent be the COVID virus. Does Krishna want to feel despair again by making intelligent life again?
Oh, come on. Your question is similar to the prior question. Why are there lower modes, and then why is there consequences for acting in the lower modes? Where does coronavirus come from? You know, whether it comes from some bat or some other lower species and people devouring bats or lower species, or however it got transmitted to humans, the abominable behavior that its source, and that it's affecting many people, too many people in the world, infecting, and some killing. It's a mass karma consequence, and why Krishna should not feel despair over that. He doesn't like just meting out our what is deserving for us. He doesn't want that. He does that to teach us, just like I'm speaking strongly, and it's to eradicate ignorance. But these questions are born of ignorance. So maybe I shouldn't be speaking so strongly. But the intention is to address the ignorance that's behind the question. There's not evolution of species. And the Lord can have feelings. Within him is everything. And it's the proper feeling of despair. Living entities, they should have the chance to regain their position of happiness. Next.
Question from Snehavalli Devidasi. My question, I'm not sure if it falls in the category of hermeneutics. I would appreciate if you could please elaborate some more. In Brihad Bhagavatamrita, we read verses by Narada Muni, where he states that even in the lower species of life in Vaikuntha, they are the personal associates of Krishna. They assumed these forms to serve the Lord in various ways, and they have worshipped the Lord in these forms.
Yes.
Here in verse 28 and 29, it states that lower forms do not have sufficient intelligence.
That's in the material realm, not in Vaikuntha realm.
and Krishna consciousness is possible only in human form of life,
Yes,
respectively.
one is speaking Vaikuntha and the other is speaking this world, and they're not the same. Next.
Secondly, from Snehamali Devidasi, I have heard from you previously that for the Lord all species are equal. Here in verse 28, it says that the Lord was not satisfied after creating many different species.
Well, to say this is a hermeneutics question, because the statement over here and the statement over there, they seem to contradict. That's a hermeneutic question. So how to reconcile is a hermeneutics exercise. And we discussed it yesterday, and I don't mind discussing it again and again and again. The species are equal. What does that mean? And the species are unequal. What does that mean? That's what hermeneutics is, to try to understand what something means. How to properly understand what something means. So the context and the intention of those statements is important. The context here is that the human form of life is especially, could you get some water? The human form of life is especially privileged to have the capacity to inquire and to realize the absolute truth. And so it's special. That's the distinction part. And that they're equal has to do with, from the Lord's perspective, the spirit soul is the essence. The spirit soul is the essence. And the covering is not the essence. So pandita samadarshana, even if a pundit can see equally, there's distinctions of life forms, but they see equally because the soul within, that's how the Lord sees, and that's how pundits see. There's no difference. There's difference, but no difference because of the soul within.
There is a question from Shriya Devidasi. She asks, unrelated question, if okay. When we are in the deep sleep, Shushukti stage, there is no influence of time.
Yes?
What does that mean?
That we don't experience the influence of time, but there is influence of time. There's influence of time in this world. We don't experience it because consciousness is so covered, we're not experiencing anything. But time is there, and we're not experiencing it.
Question from Amara Devidasi.
Hold it directly as a unit. Yes.
Amara Devidasi. How to bring people's attention to the mode of goodness? Because when they are enamored by the immediate cause, particularly in the current pandemic situations,
In current what?
pandemic situations
Okay.
with doctors and vaccines positions.
The question puzzles me. This is an interesting morning. What does pandemic have to do with mode of goodness? Do you understand? Can you, without reading back the question, what's she asking? Do you understand what she's asking? How do we help people understand the mode of goodness when the pandemic is going on?
Oh, no. She
Say it in simple
she
language.
clarified her question. She says, how to bring people's attention to remote cause when they are so enamored by the immediate cause, particularly in the current pandemic situation, with people's reliance on these resources, such as?
Well, depends on the person you're speaking to how to bring their attention to the remote cause. If they're abstract thinkers, then there's, I can think of a really nice way and explain Nimitta Maya and Upadan Maya, and then the ultimate cause that's behind both. Like the nice example of the clay and the potter's wheel and the instruments and the potter. The potter makes the wheel spin. The potter molds the clay and uses instruments, but then there's the unchanging potter. So that the remote cause, where did the potter come from? Where did the clay come from? Where did the wheel come from? Behind, so depending upon the thoughtfulness of the individual, you can help them understand remote cause. And there's other ways. Prabhupada would do it all the time. You know, the seasons are turning, or the ocean comes up to a certain line, it doesn't cross a certain line. Why? There's phases of the moon and the rising and setting of the sun right on time. Why? What's the remote cause? You may not be able to understand what that is, but you can understand there is. An intelligent, thoughtful person can give contemplation to that. You know, why is there varieties of flowers? Why is it that the leaves come out in the spring and fall off in the fall? And it does in quick order. Why is that? What's the remote cause? You can say, well, the season changes. Why there's season changes? You keep going, and there's a remote cause. Some people can't go there. They don't think like that. But you can help people think like that. Depends on the person, how you do it. That's it. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki